Hey, political junkies. We were supposed to have Kevin Schultz today after a number of difficult problems. We rescheduled Kevin for next Wednesday, same time at 12 Eastern time. But as long as I've got you here, let's go over some of the stuff that's been going on this week. I hope you saw earlier this week a post that was a sort of teaser about a piece I wrote about Susan Brown Miller, the famous feminist. That came out in the Yale Review. You can read a part of it on the Substack, and then you have to go to the Yale Review because they've got exclusive copyright for the next 3 months. So sorry about making you make that jump. But yesterday, Neil and I talked about the Epstein Files. We also had some technical difficulties yesterday, too, because Neil's end of the conversation, the internet connection was lousy. And so we lost a big chunk of Neil in the middle of it. And I'm sorry about that. But let's talk about why you might want to listen to that podcast anyway. We talked about a couple of things, one of which is a theme that Neil and I have been tracking, which is the growing rift in MAGA. We keep wanting and hoping for this to happen. And finally, it looks like members of the Republican Party are finally breaking away from Donald Trump, or at least creating some air between themselves and Donald Trump. Chief among them is Thomas Massie of Kentucky. There's also Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's also Lauren Boebert. Now, people have been following me for a long time know that I have a history of being really hard on Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. And there's a lot of good reasons to do this. One is, of course, that they really got on board with the culture war themes that then centered the abuse of trans feminine people and telling lies about them and creating policies that have been very, very hurtful. So Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert are fully implicated in that. Furthermore, Marjorie Taylor Greene is fully implicated in the anti-Semitic trends in the Republican Party, a sort of part of the party that is not only conspiracist, but that conspiracism veers over into explicit connections between Jews and the ills of the world, right? So I'm just putting that out there to say I am not getting behind Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene. However, even your enemies deserve credit sometimes. And I would say that both of those women have showed exceptional courage in standing up to Trump. Now, if you want to think a little bit further back, this is very recent history. This is last week when the discharge petition to release the Epstein Files was signed by the 218th person, which is Adelina Grijalva, who was the congresswoman from Arizona, who was not sworn in for weeks, for 7 weeks, because she would be the 218th signature on that petition. The Trump administration fought to get somebody else off that petition so that when Grijalva arrived and signed it, they wouldn't have enough signatures. To that end, Donald Trump put particular pressure on Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. Now, two things. One is Trump has now turned on Greene specifically, called her a traitor, brought down all kinds of MAGA hell on her, to which she is standing up very strongly. I mean, she's a very interesting and very strong person. Lauren Boebert seems to have avoided all of that. But one of the things I thought about and that Neil and I talked about last week is that Lauren Boebert had reasons, and Marjorie Taylor Greene have reasons for caring deeply about the Epstein Files. Let's talk about what those reasons are. On the one hand, Marjorie Taylor Greene is middle class, born middle class. Her father's in construction. But that put her in a position when she graduated from college. She married her college boyfriend, went to work for her father's construction company. What is it like for a woman in a male environment on construction sites, right? I think one of the things we might want to think about are the ways in which Marjorie Taylor Greene, even though she's a woman of some privilege, is intimately familiar with how badly men behave and what they do to women. Think construction sites, think CrossFit. CrossFit is an extraordinarily male environment, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of the few women who purchased and established a CrossFit franchise, right? Okay, so she's feeling it. Lauren Boebert is a slightly different story. Same place, different story. Lauren Boebert was married when she was 16 years old to a much older man, probably because she was pregnant, and probably because she either couldn't get an abortion, didn't want an abortion, had sort of fallen under the sway of this man. She's now divorced from him. She was married to him for many years. But she was a working class woman who worked as a waitress for many years. We think she may have worked as a stripper or an escort. That is unconfirmed. I just want to say that was a little bubble that came out about 2 years ago, and I've never really seen anybody dig deeply into it. But Lauren Boebert also knows what horrible things men do. And so we're seeing a really interesting moment in MAGA in which the Epstein Files in particular is becoming a moment for conservatives and liberals to do what political scientists call horseshoeing. In other words, they end up at the same place for different reasons. Now, there are plenty of political reasons to release the Epstein Files as well, but let's sort of continue this thought because Donald Trump has profited from conspiracism. Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene have participated in conspiracism. So there is this kind of conspiratorial thinking in the Republican Party that has sustained MAGA, that is really sort of the one thread that MAGA maintains constantly, even as they follow Donald Trump through his changes, his shifts on position. He wants one thing today, he wants another thing tomorrow. He wants to get rid of H-1B visas. Oh, no, we don't have the people that we need in the United States. We need the H-1B visas. So if you are a MAGA follower, you need to be able to do two things at the same time. One is continue to support President Trump no matter what, right? No matter how he reverses himself, no matter how contradictory he is. But the other thing you need to be able to do is maintain a sense of what MAGA means. And one of the things MAGA is about is good people protecting bad people. Now, those bad people are sometimes completely fictional, but think about the cultural strains that have been running through MAGA and the Republican Party for the last 10 years. Pedophilia, immigrants being a source of crime and particularly danger to women, okay? The myth that immigrants are dangerous to women has absolutely driven MAGA tolerance for something that they would otherwise actually reject, which is the deployment of the army around the United States. That's something the right has feared for years. Look at the attacks on not trans people, but trans women, the quote-unquote men in women's bathrooms, that terrible things will happen to women if someone who was born as a man and is now a woman, now identifies as a woman, is in that bathroom, okay? So the protection of women runs through all of these various conspiracy theories and culture war items, okay? Back to Epstein. What didn't happen here? No one protected those women. In many cases, their parents didn't know. In many cases, the parents were working poor people, like a great many MAGAs, working poor white people, if I can expand the description. And the kids were trying to make money, right? And it was a lot of money for kids, $100 here, $200 there. Go and get a friend. I'll give you another $200, right? So, so there was a lot of money involved in relation to women who had very little social power and very few people who were available to protect them. Okay. Now, Jeffrey Epstein finally gets caught because there is one mother who figures out what's going on and she goes to the police, right? And that's how in 2008, Jeffrey Epstein ended up in jail, albeit a very peculiar jail situation where he was allowed to leave for like 12 hours a day in order to go work. And so, I mean, it was insane and had everything to do with all of his powerful connections, right? Okay, so swing it back to Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene. These are women who actually often feel vulnerable in the worlds they're in. In particular, look at MAGA world. Look at how many abusive men are around Donald Trump, men who actually have a history of abuse. Look at the people in Congress. Corey Mills, the congressman from Florida, is currently involved in a whole set of legal problems because of his verbal abuse of women who tried to break up with him, his threat that he would expose a woman, would give out nude shots of her, right? She was a beauty queen, right? And she couldn't have that kind of stuff going around, right? And she had given those nude pictures of herself to him on the assumption, and this is a great one, that they were engaged, right? When in fact he was actually married to someone else and actually dating a third woman. All right. So this is the atmosphere that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert are in, right? And the fact that both of these women decided we don't think together because they're not friends anymore. They were friends and then they had a falling out. They decided that this was their red line. The Epstein Files was their red line with MAGA. It's extraordinary on one level. It's very courageous on another level, and it's unsurprising on a third. Okay. Now let's look at another person behind this, Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie, congressman from Kentucky. Again, Trump has gone after him, and he has said, and Thomas Massie actually wasn't sure he was going to run again in 2026, which is part of when he got on board with this. He was like, I don't know whether I'm going to run again, so it doesn't matter to me what he does to me. Well, what Trump has said is that he's now going to support a challenger to Thomas Massie. Look at what happened next. Rand Paul, one of the senators from Kentucky. The other one is Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is retiring, so Rand Paul will soon be the senior senator of Kentucky. Rand Paul steps in and says, no, President Trump, you do this, and I will do everything I can to support Thomas Massie. I will put money behind it. I will put my people behind it. I will put my influence behind it. Don't do this. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But what it has all produced is something extraordinarily interesting. Within a month, we have had three major events. One, the rejection of MAGA in practically every single election in the United States. All right. It's a little too small to call it a blue wave, but let's just say winning the governorship of New Jersey, winning the governorship of Virginia, and winning two important mayorships, Zoran Mamdani in New York and Katie, what is Katie's last name? In Seattle, two Democratic socialists. This is really sending a signal. The fact that people turned out in presidential numbers to vote for the proposition in California for redistricting. The fact, and again, we have to dig a little under the surface for this, the fact that Indiana, bright red state, has said to Trump, no, we're not going to redistrict for you. Ohio has said, no, we're not going to redistrict for you. Oklahoma has said, no, we're not going to redistrict for you. This is more than cracks in the wall of MAGA. This is an opportunity to see what Americans in the middle are really thinking and what they're saying to their representatives. Okay, so that's one thing that has happened. Second thing that has happened, the government shutdown. Absolute division between the Democrats and the Republicans on the shutdown. Democrats being absolutely intransigent and saying, no, we're not going to do this until you give us our health care back. Republicans say no. 8 Democrats finally walk across the aisle and say, all right, we're going to end the agony. And a lot of people criticize them for that. But let's look at what might have happened. First of all, we have 8 Democrats, senators, who were actually talking to 8 Republican senators or more. Okay? You don't give your vote away for absolutely nothing. You don't just wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to ditch my party's position and go help the Republicans not look like idiots. You don't do that. So there's something else going on there. It's also significant that there were only 8, which brought them to 60, which brought them to cloture. 60 is always the magic number. But there weren't 9. There weren't 10, there weren't 7, and somebody hanging out there. There were precisely 8, and it happened really fast. Okay, so we've got that. And then the third thing is we have got this rolling agony of the Epstein Files, an agony that will not be ended by this bill. In fact, it will increase. Why? So Julie Brown, who did the original reporting on Epstein, pointed out on Twitter the other day that there are all kinds of files that are not going to be included in any release that happens next. Okay? Why? First of all, because they are related to supposedly open investigations, although to the best of our knowledge, Pam Bondi, otherwise known as Justice Barbie, is not doing any of these investigations. She's just building firewalls. Okay, so there's that. Open investigation, anything that could be an open investigation, anything that the statute of limitations has not run out on as a federal crime. That includes files from the CIA, Homeland Security, the FBI, the DOJ, probably ICE as well. I mean, Customs and Border Patrol is probably involved in this, okay? So we got that other thing hanging out there. And I think we are looking at an inflection point here. I don't think Donald Trump is going to go away. I don't think his people are going to go away, not yet. But here are some signs that things are crumbling. If you see one of these things, you know things are falling apart. First of all, if Susie Wiles, the chief of staff, leaves, okay? Wiles was probably planning to leave after the 2026 midterms. That's normally what a chief of staff does in the second term. If she leaves early, that's a sign that things are happening that she can no longer countenance and that she finds damaging to her future interests, okay? That's one thing. Second thing, if you see the Republicans make a move on health care that is their own move and not the White House's move, that signals a little bit of air between the Republican-dominated Congress and the White House, okay? Third thing, if we begin to see the Epstein estate involved in the release of documents, okay? So the Epstein estate has from time to time sent things to journalists, allowed journalists to look at things, but Mark Epstein, who is Jeffrey Epstein's brother, who has been shamed and humiliated by Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, is on the side of transparency, and he is on the side of using whatever influence he has as a family member to make this thing right. as opposed to what the Republican Party wants, which is for it to just go away. And when I say Republican Party, I'm talking about the president, I'm talking about the leadership. Um, I'm not necessarily talking about congresspeople or senators. And here's the other thing. We're going to see a lot of pushback from red states on their senators and representatives on healthcare and on Epstein. Okay, that's going to be happening in the next 2 months. And so when that happens, we may begin to see Republicans starting to not exactly flip on the Trump agenda, but show hesitancy, slow it down, sponsor legislation that gets in the way. So far, Democrats have just been playing the game of delay, 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 delay. But as the Epstein thing ramps up, and it will, as the healthcare burdens on Americans who are struggling economically anyway ramp up, and it will, as we see those things, we may begin to see Republican members of Congress basically fending for themselves, saying, Donald Trump can't save me. MAGA can't save me. Only I can save me. And that's where we will begin to see the crumble really happen. Probably not in the next 3 weeks, but look to the first of the year. Okay, so that's what I'm thinking about this week. We are going to have Kevin Schultz back, and I've got my technical problem solved, obviously. So Kevin Schultz is going to come back next Wednesday at noon to talk about liberalism. Kevin wrote a book called Why Everyone Hates Liberals, and it began to look at the November election, actually, that people don't hate liberals so much, or maybe they hate them less than they hate conservatives right now. Okay. So Kevin's going to be back to talk to us about that on Wednesday. I want to ask you for 2 things before I go. First one is sign up at Political Junkie. Most of my subscribers are free subscribers. I'd love to have more paying subscribers. Doing this takes a lot of time. If you can just try me for $5 a month, that would be awesome. I may do more of these Facebook Lives for paying subscribers only. So the next time one's coming up, which is next Wednesday, think about it. Think about whether you would be interested in being a paying part of this community. However, you know where I'd really like to see your money go is it to public media. Now, I'm a form of public media in that I'm not owned by a corporation, but real public media, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, has been dissolved by Congress. It's been defunded. So PBS, any shows on PBS that you value, and particularly National Public Radio. National Public Radio is a lifeline for Americans in rural and remote areas. It's a safety measure. It's educational. Even here in Massachusetts, where we have lots and lots and lots of resources, we have a show called The Fabulous 413 that comes on every afternoon and is completely devoted to topics of interest to people who live in Western Massachusetts. Okay. Local news is worth supporting. Local news and keeping people informed about issues that are important to them, not to people out in some state where they don't live in, but to them, to their town, to their school, to their community. It's important to maintain that. So, if you can't be a paid subscriber to me, support public media. And here's a bonus for you. If you give $50 to public media, and send me the notice, the receipt, get rid of your credit card number. I don't want your credit card number. I will comp you a free year of a paid subscription to Political Junkie. Okay. You can get to me through this platform, and just send me the receipt, $50 or more, and you get a free year of a paid subscription to political junkie. Okay? Thanks so much for your time. I loved seeing you today. I'm going to get better at these Substack lives, and I'll see you soon, friends. Bye.